others provided many others for May. My records of this incident goes over 7 pages. Here, this and the next slide that follows have got just 2.5 minutes from the interaction. I obviously don't have time to analyse it. All I've looked for, you see, is the space where is the place where the eruption happened. You see how poor in a way the textual, what can you do except say, it's so emotional, it's so genuinely astounded. One thing to want to make is you can see the very rapidity of the messages. So in fact, there's a great deal of overlap going on because you can see Vivia's quite long message has actually she's been typed. Sorry, I haven't explained that all clearly. There's a great deal of overlap because of the fact that you're typing and it doesn't, come into the thing. I should have written that bit down properly. I thought I'm very good at explaining that, so I won't bother to write that down myself. So I think I'll read that. One thing you can notice is that presumably it's actually all the students we gave the name surname Skoma to, so you can tell which terms are by students. So you can see that it's Vivia who's decided to introduce the term of pyroclastic flow, well beyond anything that I was able to come out with in the heat of the moment. Then she's also prepared. She's got the term of pumice. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right there. And I did, however, then establish the fact that it was Marsbar who had created it. Now, of course, because we have such enormous amounts of text in these logs, we can use corpus linguistics, which is what we're doing. I did do an initial parlance analysis that probably won't have time to show you. I'm now in the process with some help of Costas Gabrielatis and Andrew Hardy at Lancaster University in dealing with some of the technical difficulties that these logs, that include, for example, such an amount of overlap, dates, yes, have. So say, for example, though, that I look for volcano. I just want to mention a couple of problems besides the overlap problem. And the overlap problem is not that you will literally have exactly the same records, because you remember that I said that you record what's within 30 metres of you. So therefore, if you're standing in different places, you can have similar logs, but not exactly the same. There's also this issue that you program objects to speak. So the chat logs have many objects that speak in inverted commas, obviously. So you have many such things such as this, which is somebody who's made a transporter to transport people from different places around. So when I was looking for volcano, I get find bits like this in the log. Situated cognition, is a good way of considering the language that can be felt to emanate, as it were, from an artifact. Most of the mentions of volcano I found were to do with navigation, turn right at the volcano and things like that. I did find this, but this was traced to a completely different occasion from the eruption. So though it's a different occasion, and it was actually not about the same kind of eruption, it was about a little sort of paltry little lava flow happening on another occasion. I was just interested to see that in this chit chat that the professor who wasn't there earlier, one of the students was nevertheless bringing in Pompeii. Where am I? Yes. So the activities in marine archaeology. In archaeology involved recovery, preservation, and curating of finds, investigating the levels of Roman roads, recreating the main temple of Chichen Itza, and so on. The team decided to enter a competition called Learner's Y Factor, which was a handheld learning conference in October. So they went to this conference in London, and so this was the first time that they'd met together. They had to plan it online. So on the wiki, they prepared their PowerPoints, which is a very different sort of wiki page because they put the images up and then they used the notes section below to collaboratively write the script. They then decided to produce a section of the wiki that was quite different from that. This was outward facing, as it were, so that they could refer the judges to this with its links and so forth. Now, when I can look at the history page on this, which I couldn't do earlier, to see at any time the technology enables you to capture each of these is a modification of the page. So we can generally see that the students were, you can compare any two versions, you can see precisely what words or what images, what somebody contributed each time. But one of the things I want to draw, I mentioned Topper's invisible method before, was that apart from doing what they do, they also sometimes provide these remarks that are kind of backroom annotations that would generally be of sort of no interest. It's a kind of backroom annotation that shows an enormous investment of effort, so they can explain to others who might choose to look there, but most likely wouldn't, what they're doing. I think then that I'm very grateful to Chris for reminding me of this particular because you have so many definitions of creativity at hand, which is the most useful here, and I do particularly like this one. So creativity emerges from interactional language encounters. It is often contingent. The nature of the different wiki pages, for example, depends upon the purpose. Produced and co-produced in domains in which new forms of social encounter require the formation of different interactive practices and new identities. So, to return to liminality, the concept of liminality, Bolswell thinks virtual, he reminds us that it can often be almost, but there's that kind of quality there, particularly perhaps virtually. Hutchins suggests that when you're considering a person who is actively engaged in a culturally constructed world, let us soften the boundary of the individual and take the individual to be a very plastic kind of adaptive system. He continues then, instead of conceiving the relation between person and environment in terms of moving coded information across a boundary, let us look at processes of entrainment, coordination and resonance among elements of a system that includes a person and that person's surroundings. This is a snapshot of myself as tetraplean in the adult second life, join this tram on Etopia Island, it feels very real. An immersion is of course a phenomenon, I'm absolutely not claiming it's a new phenomenon, we know it, where do we more know it in some ways than in reading a novel, for example. And then his quotation there can be read in that light. But the apparent multidimensionality of it, the truly interactive environment, does I believe bring a new quality of liminality to bear. Now, just a few concluding remarks then on working towards a virtual literacy ethnography. Lancashire and Novel remind us, as we've seen, for example, much work that we've seen, that literacy is always about much more, involve much more than production of texts. The identity and the community building, group discourses are so important, and this fitted very much for me to help with some of the things that were happening in Acting and Affinity. Vanini suggests that we should recenter ethnographic methodology in a way that is more consonant with the subject matter of material and technocultural research. He's writing there about this particular move away from interviewing. Now, we did do some interviewing in meetings and so forth, but nevertheless, I think there's a considerable emphasis, perhaps in this style of work, on considering the different, working with the different affordances that are apparent, and that methodologically is a quest in Vanini's work again for a methodology that does not privilege communication at the expense of action, being at the expense of doing, consciousness at the expense of materiality, and speaking at the expense of making. Such new ethnography places technique as much as ethnos at the core of its concern. So Vanini suggests. Rodney Jones suggested yesterday that a key challenge for contemporary education is to provide opportunities to create imagined futures and to give them the semiotic artifacts with which to do that. We made many, many mistakes in the project, but it was the most exciting thing for me because that was what I felt that I was experiencing.